Hello, this is R Rats with Team 4545 League, analyzing the game between Fledermaus and Poisson. This was played in Team Event 53 in the second round, under 2200 section. Let's have a look. Well, interesting. All kinds of possibilities of transposition here. White could play e4, which black is probably happy to see because he's invited the Sicilian defense. But white chooses to go into symmetrical English. And there's plenty of transpositional possibilities. I won't go into all of them. English is full of those. If you like transposition positions, the English is your opening, because you can go into a lot of things. So can black. Anyway, this now more or less becomes the symmetrical variation. And one thing, I happen to know this opening quite well from both sides. I've played it many, many times, and I'll offer some of my insight into this position. I was making a few comments during the game. Anyway, it kind of transposes into the main line here. Now, normally what main line says here is that black will play knight takes d4. Okay, this is the main line, and there's many offshoots. White plays queen takes d4, and then I'll just show you main line because we're going to come back to it. You get the idea. D6 is considered main line, and then the queen comes back to D3. Now, this isn't the only variation. This is just what we consider main line. And it's not bad for either side, but white has a lot of potential here, because what happens is, in my experience, is black tends to misplay this position. And I'll just talk about this for a moment. Before I get to the correct strategy, what black will often do is put the queen and bishop together on this diagonal and go and trade off the white squared bishop to get rid of it. But there's a problem with that. Positionally, white will put his pawns on white squares and have this tremendous bishop. Okay, this pawn will go to e4, and this one to f3, and this one to b3. And basically, white has all of his pawns on the opposite color of his bishop, so his bishop just has all kinds of mobility. And black kind of suffers here because his pieces don't get too much mobility, as it turns out. So just while black is busy spending time trading off that bishop, white's building up this incredible position and usually gets a tremendous queenside initiative. But anyway, this isn't exactly how it went. This was just mainline, and I'll come back to these themes here in a moment. Black played kind of an odd move here, a6, and white went into a deep think, spent nearly half of his time on this move. And again, this is a position I'm very, very familiar with. There is just to show you one move here that black could try. Black can play d6. This is a very interesting pawn sacrifice. White can win a pawn, but black gets a lot of play for it. I won't go into the lines, but I'll just show you the main line. Knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes, and then rook b8, and black is okay here, unless some new developments in theory have come up in the 30 years since I was really into this. But anyway, one nice move that white has in this position is not to even take, but just to play knight c2. And this is a very, very handy move. It covers a couple of squares, b4 and d4, that black might like to control. And what's interesting, it even covers a1. And you say, well, what about that? Well, there's a lot of positions where white will play b3 later, and black will try some combination based on going after that knight and that rook, and all white does is take it, because he's going to end up with two minor pieces for the rook, and I've had games that go that way. So, in spite of everything else, if you just know this theory, white can do well with just playing knight c2 here. And I went ahead and I looked up my source material on this. This is this excellent source written by one of the greatest modern chess authors ever, John Watson, who broadcasts on ICC. He had a 4-volume set on the English opening, and it's just tremendous. And I went ahead and checked it the publication date is 1980, and he also gives E3 as a possible move. And actually quotes a couple games from back in 1964, 63, where white just gets this really good game. So if you know the theory of the opening, you can play an automatic move like knight c2 and not even blink. It's going to go into transpose into positions that white does quite well with in the variations where he doesn't accept the gambited pawn. Because face it, black's going to have to play d6 here in a moment, and white's right into exactly what he wants. Okay, so white didn't play that, but what he played wasn't a bad move. I mean, there's short of dropping a piece, there's no real bad move here. This transposes into some of the ideas that white will do in this opening, although generally the rook will more so go to c1 rather than b1. Okay, then black takes and white takes. Okay, and now d6, and again we're back in the pretty much the main strategy of this opening. That the only differences are that the white rook has gone to b1 instead of later c1, as I said, and the pawn on a6 is going to happen sooner or later, and then white finds queen d3, which is good. And like I say, we're basically in the main line that I showed at the very beginning, just a slight difference in the position. White's committed to rook b1 here. But what black needs to do, there's pretty much only one good strategy for black here. Well, there's more than that, but what black played is okay. But the main strategy for black to get full equality, and black should be happy with a draw, the strategy is to play in this order: knight d7 followed by knight c5. Okay, that tempos the queen. Then you bring in bishop d7. Well, not yet. You have to guard b7. Okay, rook b8, bishop d7, and then play for b5. If black does that, he can maintain equality in this position, and that's pretty much the only path in this line. Now, what he played, arguably it can equalize too. I've known some FMs that will play it. Well, he didn't play it right away, but the theme with bishop f5, you'll see it here in a second. We'll talk about it. Okay, now bishop f5. This can happen in main line right after queen d3, and then the bishop goes back to e6, and once again black is fine. But the better strategy for equality, as far as I recall from looking at all the games in Watson's book when I was really into this 30 years ago and so forth, was that the best strategy for black was to do what I showed. But this is okay too. Okay, so now b3, and this is fine. This is going into the mainline type positions that I mentioned, where white puts his pawns on white squares and invites an exchange of the light squared bishops. Okay, and son of a gun, black goes right into it. Kind of surprising that neither side really knows the theory here. So I was talking about it, and I was saying that white's just going to get this great game here, and probably what white should do here is just admit his mistake and put the rook on c1. That's fine. You've lost a little tempo, but it shouldn't be critical here. Arguably, black has lost a tempo with rook b8, since he's probably not going to be playing for b5 here. He's not lined up for it. That would be a perfectly logical move. Rook fd1 is okay, but anyway, white plays the aggressor here and sees there's a potential fork here and causes black to deal with it. Black could take on d5 with the bishop. This is a whole nother game. I played a game against a FIDE master by correspondence one time where he was able to take with the bishop on d5 and reach a drawable knight versus bishop ending. Kind of frustrating for white that he had the bishop but couldn't win it, a la the famous game Stoltz versus Cashton, The Hague, 1928. But that's another story. Anyway, rook e8, and then now white does admit his mistake and plays rook ac1, and he's got it on the right square. So White's doing fine here. Okay, this is kind of an odd move. Again, it would have been better to play it to d7 with the idea going to c5 at many points in the game. But anyway, now White plays what I consider a mistake. Plays bishop c3, and Black should just immediately, without hesitation, capture that bishop, because, as I was saying, that bishop is White's key if the fin-kitted bishop is traded off on g2. If you look at the Black position on the queen side, look at all these squares that are weak. They're on Black squares. Those are squares that bishop could go and occupy. So logically, what White should do, and I'll show you, is just play f3 here. Yes, the knight's going to e5, and it's going to have a tempo on the queen, but that's okay. We just come back to e2, and we hope that Black continues with bishop h3 and trades off that white squared bishop. So White's just owning here positionally. Bishop can come to e3, and we can soon think about sinking something in on b6. We can even play a4 here to help bolster down the queen side. I've got a number of games where I'll have to share sometime on my website where Black tries these strategies and White just eats them alive. But positionally, White is crushing here. It's a very, very simple game to play. Anyway, he didn't do that. Black didn't take. He played here. Now White comes back to d2. E2 might have been a little more prudent because Black gets some little tactics. Now, naturally, White would like to take here, but I guess this check might... Well, not really. He could do it. And the queens are going to come off. Let's see. Bishop takes... here's the fork, because White's on Black's queen also. But then Black's on a rook down there too, so it gets a little messy. Yeah, Black's fine here. Knight takes. And White cries. He's dropped the exchange. Okay, so we can't do that. Alright. But anyway, so f4 seems okay, but it's a little concession that White wants that pawn on f3, as I was explaining. It just gives more mobility to the dark squared bishop if it's on f3, and White has this solid center that Black can't really do anything against. There's some possibilities of a queen check, although not right now. Anyway, f4, and then Black does exactly what White wants. He trades off the bishop on there. But unfortunately now White's going to have to trade off his other bishop, and he's also running low on time. But if the white queen was on e2, then White could preserve that bishop with bishop d2. Okay, but it's not there, and let's see. Let's just assume it was on e2, and then knight bishop d2 is going to be followed by knight d4. But Black's that knight will just be a target there. We're going to eventually attack it, and Black will have to give up that square. But anyway, the queen isn't on e2, so it's just fantasy. It's just an idea. But now White trades off his great minor piece. But this isn't all that bad, trading off that piece, because as a result, although White's traded off pieces he'd rather use to his benefit, conducting the middle game and later potential end games, he's kind of crippled Black a little bit. Black doesn't really have anything to show for his conduction of the late opening, early middle game. All the bishops have been traded off, and we're left with a position where White just simply has greater board room. White has 3 pawns on the 4th rank and 2 on the 3rd rank, and Black has 3 pawns on the 3rd rank. Black's not really controlling a great deal of the center here, is he? He's got some pressure on d4. That's about it. That's about the only square under Black's control. White's looking into b6, e7 with his knight. His knight's very active. If there's an exchange on d5 at some point, which is kind of hard to visualize, black is white will get control of that c file if there's a tempo on the queen. If black plays e6 at some point, he's got a backward pawn on d6. His only real pawn break is, well, he could do b5 about here. F5 is an interesting break often used, but it tends to give black an extra pawn island. Anyway, let's see what happened. Rook e1. Now black kind of covers some of those loose squares on the queen side. And they just kind of maneuver around a little bit. Black offers a draw. And I think white's fine taking it, because even though he's better off here, look at the clock. He's only got 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes to play with. Even though he gets a 45-second increment every move, it's not a bad idea to take it. But if white had time on the clock, white could play this position for a win. I'm not saying he's going to win, but he could play it for a win. It's a little harder to win when you've traded off that dark squared bishop. Anyway, I hope this was useful. Thanks so much for your time, and I'll see you in the next game. Take care.